Hi, I'm Juan. I work as a guide for the Central Park Conservancy. On behalf of everyone in our organization, welcome to Central Park. We'll be together for approximately 15 minutes exploring the sites in Central Park's Conservatory Garden. Before we move on, a little bit of housekeeping. Our mission here at the Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. We are using Zoom as an interface to connect today. If we have any issues in our connection today, if you disconnect, for example, all you need to do is click the link that you clicked to get in the first place. And if I disconnect, I'll try to reconnect. My colleagues Ian and Jose are on the back end helping you find answers to any questions that you might have. Feel free to use the chat feature to add those questions. Say hello as well. Let us know where you are tuning in from. And if you do have a question for which you'd like an answer, use that Q&A feature, which you will find in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom controls. I will also launch two polls throughout the sessions. You can dismiss the poll if you don't want to participate. But if you do, it'll be cool because it can help us gain some insight as to who is with us today and how we are perceiving this virtual walk in our cherished Central Park. I'm also going to turn on closed captioning right about now for anyone interested. Let's see if I remember correctly, live transcript here, enable auto transcription. And you'll see a pop-up on your screen, and this will allow you to read what I'm communicating. But if you want, you can also turn it off as well. This is something new that we're trying, increasing accessibility to our programs here in the park. The photos that I'll be sharing with you are photos I took within the last couple of days. And a couple of photos also one photo actually comes from the collection that we have here in the Conservancy, from the Conservancy's archives, and also one photo from the New York Historical Society. Now let's move on. This is a map of the park here. As you see, and many of you know, it's a very big park running from 59th Street to 110th Street and from 5th Avenue to 8th Avenue on the other side. A total of 843 acres. Now, the section that we are exploring today is highlighted with this red box that you see here on the bottom left. It's the Conservatory Garden. It's a garden that opened in 1937. It's only 6 acres. It's located right in front of El Museo del Barrio along Museum Mile. Now, what we're going to see here today isn't what was always here. Again, 1937 is when this opened, and the park itself, Central Park, has been here since really 1858. So a lot has happened since then. The Conservatory Garden is one of the newer additions. Prior to the garden of today, this is what we had on this site, in this section of the park. You see, it's a building, it's a conservatory that was built in 1899, and it was built to display plants to the public, plants that were not necessarily typical or native to this part of the world. This building fell into disrepair in the early 20th century. By the 1930s, it was demolished, and in 1937 is when we get the landscape that we are about to explore today. This is a bird's eye view of the garden today. It's, again, 6 acres of territory. And it's internationally inspired because it features a French, Italian, and English garden. It was designed by a man named Gilmore Clark. He was the chief landscape architect under New York City Parks Commissioner Robert Moses, a man who served as the head of the New York City Parks Department in the first half of the 20th century. This section of the park today is well known for plantings of tulips, lilacs, crabapple trees, summer perennials, and chrysanthemums in the fall. 6 full-time staff and dozens of volunteers take care of this cherished space year-round. We've presented this garden before on a previous walk in May of last year. Our former colleague Brendan shared many historical details and images we will forego today. Instead, we are going to navigate the garden and see how it's looking this season. My colleague Jose will drop the link to that walk held in May of last year for anyone interested in time traveling to the park back to that season, to the previous season. I wanted to ask who has visited the Conservatory Garden before? So I'll launch the poll. Let me see, I'm clicking on the button here, spring flowers, and launch the poll. And the question is, have you visited the Conservatory Garden? You can choose if you have. The first choice is yes, once or twice. Second choice is yes, multiple times. And the third choice is no. I'll very soon end the poll once everyone, for the most part, has voted. And then I will share the results. Well, from the looks of it, most results are in. Let us end the poll and share the results. And here you have it. 18% of you have visited once or twice, and a whopping 49% have visited multiple times, and 33% of you haven't visited yet. Well, after today's walk, you can technically say that you've visited. Virtual programs count big time these days. So it's a pleasure to have you on a walk today. And if you haven't visited, I hope to run into you in the future as you stroll through the park. Let's see, I'll stop sharing the results right now and move on. Let me show, this is the map that we are following today. This is our route. We'll enter from the northern side and explore the French garden. And then we'll move down and visit the Italian garden, which is at the center. And then we'll stroll and make our way through the English garden. So to exit at the main entrance, we're going to use a lesser entrance today, but as you'll see, it's very special, and we'll finish by the grand entrance that a lot of people know and recognize from images. This is how the entrance to the park looks. At this section, we are at 106th Street. This is not an entrance that is original to the design of the park, as it was an entrance that was created in the 1930s as this section of the park was reconfigured with the new garden design. As we enter into the park proper, to the left, we see a fence, and beyond that fence is our garden of interest. We're going to get closer, and as we get there, we'll see a fence, or a gate actually, that marks the entrance. This is less assuming or less elaborate than the gate that we're going to see at the end, but it is very special nonetheless, as it is a gate that memorializes a woman named Emily Mumford. And as you enter through the gate and direct your attention to the left, you'll see a plaque that memorializes Emily. Emily was born in Missouri, and she completed a master's and doctoral degrees in sociology from Columbia University, and a woman who launched a very successful career in medical sociology. She died in 1987. Around that time, the Central Park Conservancy was in its infancy nonetheless, and funding that was gathered by the people who helped organize this memorial helped establish this gate, or provide this entrance to visitors to the park. Now, beyond this gate, we begin to see the characteristic elements of the French garden. We are first encountered by this green hedge, which is actually Japanese quince, which flowers as well, produces beautiful pinkish reddish flowers. And as we get closer, we can see the characteristic features of the French garden design, which is basically circular in character with several concentric, circular concentric flower beds. We can walk along this hedge full circle, but throughout there are 4 axes that are marked by these gates covered in greenery. And in a couple of months from now, a couple of weeks rather, there'll be beautiful white roses growing from this canopy. We enter into the garden proper, and we see the largest flower beds to the left and right. Right now, or a couple of days ago, they were really popping, really looking very beautiful, featuring tulips. The pink flowers are tulips, the white flowers are daffodils, and the reds are purple pansies. Every year, the patterns are arranged differently, and we plant them in the fall. So in the previous season, most of the work is done by volunteers. I mentioned there's about a half a dozen employees, 6 employees that take care of this garden full-time, and dozens of employees as well, and even staff collaborates in the plantings. 20,000 bulbs are planted each fall in preparation for the spring. And here we see volunteers with the green shirts in the background. And here's some stuff. Here is yours truly. I was participating on last year's event, and here's my colleague Ian as well here to the right-hand side. As you can see, the beds are arranged in triangular form. As you move through this area, you'll have a very pleasant experience as you explore and visualize these beautiful blooms, these beautiful flowers. Now, getting closer to the center of the garden, we see what is the most characteristic French style in this garden, and is these parterres. I think the most elaborate forms or manifestations of parterres that I've seen are those at the Garden of Versailles in Versailles, France. But these have been here, the layout of these designs have been around since the 1930s when they were first implemented. Here I am again with my colleague Ian. We're cleaning the parterres. Looks easier than it seems. However, it can be a little bit complicated as you are removing dried up leaves. It's very easy to pull on this green hedge, and we definitely don't want to do that as we're taking care of this landscape. So to create for a garden that is enjoyed by all. Now, we were in that photo, we were pretty much right in front of, or facing this fountain at the center of the garden. It's an oval fountain that's been here since 1947. It's called Dancing Maidens and was designed by a German sculptor named Walter Schott. The sculpture originally lived at the Junkers estate of Samuel Untermeyer. Untermeyer was a prominent lawyer and civic leader during his time, and his children were the ones who donated the sculpture to Central Park after his death in 1947. This is a close-up of the fountain. A jet of water, as you see here, sprays in the center of the fountain, and there are 2 smaller jets on either side. I particularly like the expressions on the figures' faces. They look like they are having the best of times. And I visited in the winter when the sculpture is covered in ice, and even in bitter cold, this gives you a degree of warmth as you're looking at it, these very jovial figures. We're now going to leave the French garden and make our way over to the Italian garden. Very fast-paced walk, but nonetheless, here we are and making our way. We're going to exit via one of those gateways that we access in the first place. We walk along here to the right-hand side that will be in bloom in a couple of weeks. And here to the left-hand side, as we keep walking, we see azaleas that were beginning to bloom last week. They are in full bloom right now, if you were to visit. And just like that, we've entered into the Italian garden. The Italian garden is marked by these allees planted with crab apples. Crab apples are special trees that produce beautiful flowers in the springtime, very fragrant flowers as well. And a tree that is favored in landscaping for its attractive shape and, of course, those flowers and its low maintenance needs as well. The flowers themselves are white to pinkish in tone, and before they open up, they are covered in this dark pink, almost red, what is called cuticle. The cuticle drops as the flower opens, and as the petals drop to the ground, they form a beautiful atmosphere. It almost feels like it's snowing in spring. We leave those petals as long as it's permissible. For example, if it's not raining or if no rain is expected for, if these get wet, they could get very slippery. Nonetheless, a very pleasant experience to stroll through this area as the petals are falling. And here we see one of the landscapers, one of the gardeners at the Conservatory Garden clearing the path. Her name is Claudia. If you're visiting, stop Claudia and ask her any questions. She'll be more than happy to help you find answers regarding the plantings that we find in all of the gardens in the Conservatory Garden. Once cleared, this is how the promenade is looking. This is how it was looking actually last Sunday when I was visiting briefly. And on this walk today, we're going to walk all the way down and reach this red brick building where we find another type of tree that is very popular, a highlight in this section of the park in spring. And it's this twining vine that is hanging pretty much anchored on the fence that is up above, on the railing up above here. This is a plant called Wisteria. Wisteria covers all of the pergola that is situated on the western section of the conservatory of the Italian garden rather. Wisteria, it grows very fast, is an invasive plant that needs to be closely monitored so that it doesn't outgrow all of the other native plants that we have here. It wraps around very aggressively along the supports of this wrought iron pergola that we have here, a man-made object that has been made more naturalistic by these twining species. Now, although very invasive and at times considered a weed, produces beautiful flowers, and this is how the flowers are looking right now this season. From this pergola, you have beautiful views of the flowers from growing on top of the pergola itself. And if you look up, sometimes you might spot maybe a raccoon here or there. It's amazing to think that the largest mammal in the park lives in great abundance in this section of the park, considering how heavily visited it is. If you look down, you'll see these medallions installed again in the 1930s when the garden was designed, commemorating the 13 original states in the Union. And this is the view from this beautiful pergola here. From this space is where I met Louis, who was at the Conservatory Garden last week. Louis is tuned in, watching. Louis, it was a pleasure to meet you. I also met other weekly walkers when I was at the Conservatory Garden last week for the Celebrate Spring members event. And I'll show you an image later on how that event looked, how the setup looked before we exit. Louis was in all probability looking at the building in the background over here. This is an iconic building on the eastern section of the park. It's a hospice for people who need permanent care. It's called Arch Care, the organization that takes care of it or that manages it. And this is the view that we get in plain sight, but if we were to look closer, we see some very unique details. For example, here on the top window to the right, at the very bottom, we see all these twigs huddled together. This is actually the nest of a red-tailed hawk. Red-tailed hawks are in great abundance in New York, and oftentimes you see their nest on the buildings along Fifth Avenue. Now, zooming back out, we will exit the pergola via its southern side, and not before we get this beautiful view of the frame that is created by the growing wisteria and the beautiful blossoms this season. We're going to go down the steps. So to take a quick look at the Geyser Fountain, just like the French garden, the Italian garden also features this beautiful fountain where upon closer inspection, and depending on the day, if it's a sunny day especially, you might even spot a rainbow here. This photo was taken by my colleague Jen. Jennifer was here last week for that Celebrate Spring members event. We're going to now leave the Italian garden and make our way to our last section, which is the English garden. This is the promenade that is going to take us there. If we were to turn, we're going to head straight, but if we were to turn to the left here, we would walk under the canopy of the crab apples that are on this southern alley of the Italian garden. And here we've entered into the English garden. The English garden looks more picturesque. It has more varieties of plants, big mature trees as well. Directly at the center, you see this big crabapple tree. And as you enter and stroll to the right-hand side, we see this flower bed with different shrubs and different greens and flowers. At the center of the garden, under the branches of the crabapple tree, is the Brunette Fountain. The Brunette Fountain was installed here in the 1920s, 1937 rather, dedicated exactly on May 28th, 1937 to honor the memory of Francis Hodgson Burnett. Hodgson Burnett was the novelist who wrote the story The Secret Garden, and featured in the sculpture are the protagonists from the story. The male figure is playing a flute, and the female figure is holding a bird bath that is heavily used by the avian inhabitants of Central Park. Now, zooming out a little bit from the center here you see the fountain just behind this hedge, and we see the crabapple tree. This crabapple tree, this is how it looked last Sunday, but a couple of days prior, this is how it looked with all its beautiful white flowers and fragrant flowers as well. Now, some flower beds are sitting empty right now for the most part, and that's because very soon they'll be planted with flowers that will thrive and delight us in the warmer months of the year. We're headed now towards these white blooms over here, which are actually lilacs. Lilacs can be found throughout the garden. They provide a beautiful fragrance. Their flowers are very abundant, and the fragrance can be almost intoxicating. And then throughout, as you're strolling through the garden, make sure you slow down your pace, and so that nature can come to you, as it did when I was visiting, where this red cardinal stopped by and didn't move for quite a while, and dozens of people took its photo. Beautiful, beautiful display. We have now exited the English garden, walked along the southern side of the English garden, and made our way back to the Italian garden. So to exit via the main gate here, which is called Vanderbilt Gate. But before we do, let's direct our attention north, where last week and all of this week as well, Monday, well, not all of this week rather, but Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, in the morning, special events will be here greeting visitors for our Celebrate Spring event. And here's where I met Louis and a couple of other weekly walkers as well. As we get to the top of the steps here, before we exit, we see the gate, and we see these supports with these spirals. Spirals are indicatives of changes in consciousness in the fine arts Western tradition. And it is very appropriate in a sense for this particular setting, because as you enter from the walkway, from the sidewalk along Fifth Avenue and into this space, your consciousness is shifted. Your attention is redirected to the natural beauty that will surround you as you stroll through these beautiful gardens. This is again the beautiful garden, and on the other side there is the Wisteria pergola that we just walked over. Let's see, I wanted to launch another poll before we actually exit the Conservatory Garden and ask, which is your favorite flower that you saw here today, or maybe a favorite spring flower that you have? You can choose multiple options, or you can write in the comment sections and let us know which was your favorite flower. I know these events are meant to last 15 minutes. I apologize for going over our time. I hope you do not mind too much. We will just be over and finish momentarily. If you're watching on YouTube in the future, let us know in the comments section which is your favorite spring blossom as well. I see the results are coming in. They have, for the most part, made their way. I will end the poll and share the results immediately. And there you have it. Lilacs were by far the favorites, and I agree that they are one of my favorites as well. I particularly like the tulips as well, which came a close second at 41%. And then, of course, Wisteria, it's a favorite as well, and a couple of others. Read through the comment sections and see what other people chose that was their favorite spring flower. Now we're going to turn around and exit the gate And as we exit, this is how it actually looks. This is not original to the design of this landscape. This gate was installed here in 1939. It was built actually for the mansion of Cornelius Vanderbilt II. The Vanderbilts made their fortune in the railroad industry. Their mansion was located on 5th Avenue and 58th Street. And later on, his daughter, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, who founded the Whitney Museum of American Art, gifted this gate to the city. And ultimately, it was installed here at the entrance to the Italian garden in 1939. With that, this brings us to the end of our walk. This is a map for anyone who'd like to take a screenshot and recreate this walk. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope to see you on a future event. Look out in the comment sections for links that my colleague Jose will share, inviting you to my next event, actually called Crossing Central Park on March 11th. We thank you for your support. I am very grateful to have met some of you on my time last week at the garden. If you have any questions, please let us know. I'll leave the room open for a couple of moments so to help find answers to any questions that you might have. From everyone at the Conservancy, stay safe and be well. Bye-bye.